So do you feel like the criticism, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, is coming more from a place of, certain decisions that you've made, or people just don't like you, or they don't like working with you, they don't agree with a more, and I don't know if this is a fair characterization, but more of like a social justice, civil rights kind of, layer that you have in your tenure here? Do you think that that is what's going on here?
A couple of things there. I have focused on public safety. And public safety, in my mind, has to be around data and research. I'm interested in doing what works, which is a reflection of this policy, right? Why do we want to do something that doesn't work? Our recidivism rates in Hennepin County and elsewhere too, meaning the percentage of people who come back after they've committed a crime, are really high. So we could look at those and say, we're not doing a great job rehabilitating people coming back. So how can we improve that? And those are the types of things we focus on. We focus on how to prevent young people from being involved in the system, and we've done that a number of ways. We also send people to prison practically every day. We issue press releases. I mean, I look at the press release and I think, the number of people we have sent to prison is a lot. And that is appropriate for some people. They're not safe in the community. So if we're focusing on public safety, we knew the things that work for public safety. Now, in terms of why people react that way, I think the non-public safety traffic stop is perfect. Why is it that John Choi has done it successfully over in Ramsey County since 2021, and people have this reaction when we're implementing it here? What is that about? I think in many ways I've become some kind of lightning rod. Some people will just point at anything we do, even if it's already being done successfully. And I think you saw that perhaps with your interview with Congressman Emmer, right? I did go back and look at that interview, and you were asking him questions about mass shootings and enunciation at the time. Yeah. I suspect you were about to ask him about gun violence, right? And he knew that. And he also knows that most people in the United States do not believe that community members need to have access to assault rifles. But instead of allowing you to ask that question and respond in a civilized way, because he was interrupting you and kind of shouting at you. It was rude to you. But rather than letting you ask that, he knew where you were going, and then suddenly, pivoted to hurling insults at me that had absolutely nothing to do with what you were talking about. And I think that's what happens when people know their actual positions aren't supported by data, or that people want something different. They just pivot and they attack a person and yell about that and make up a bunch of things. And I think that that's particularly dangerous in this time. Of course, we've seen a lot of political violence, and I think it's irresponsible to engage in that kind of hurling insults and kind of reckless behavior when we have people being shot and killed. I think Republicans everybody's starting to talk about being more civil, right? And so rather than hurling insults at me when you were not asking him anything to do about me, because he didn't want to answer that question. Like, how come you in Congress, you aren't doing anything about guns when we keep seeing children being shot and we know guns are part of the problem? And he did not want to answer that question, and so he just started hurling insults at me.
I think, you bringing up the Trooper Londrigan case, I think is probably at the heart of this and I don't want to assume, but for some law enforcement and politicians, perhaps on the right, that is really, when you talk about a lightning rod situation, do you see kind of where they're coming from, where if that's their foundation, and saying, well, boy, she just really, screwed that up, or, the things that they're saying. Do you acknowledge that? Do you see that? Do you kind of take that in, or do you just say, I can't even kind of deal with that because there's so many different layers to this?
Well, I understand that that has become a talking point for them. What I will say about it is we did exactly the right thing at all steps of the way, which meant actually dismissing the case when we didn't feel that we should go forward, and that is something new for prosecutors, and it's something that we have instilled in our office too. Sometimes there can be this, I charged it, I have to go through with it, right? But if it's not the right thing to do, you shouldn't be doing it, and that's something we talk to our people about. You are always gathering new information, wherever that comes from, and if there reaches a point where you should not ethically be going forward with the prosecution, you have to let it go. So we did that. It's also important to know that we do work with law enforcement a lot. There were law enforcement people who told me that Londrigan should have been charged. So, people are entitled to have different opinions. Absolutely. There are some people who felt he should be charged, some people who didn't, some people who thought it shouldn't have happened, but he shouldn't have been charged. That's legitimate. People should be able to talk about that. But we should also be able to work together, which we do. I mean, we worked with all of law enforcement on ERPOs, Extreme Risk Protection Orders. I hired Raina Alexander to be a coordinator of that. She's done a lot of training and coordination with law enforcement throughout Hennepin-County. We worked with, and this was a policy we developed with Hennepin County law enforcement, our youth auto theft initiative, and they refer young people to us. But if you ask them to talk about it publicly, they won't. Because it's become some kind of, if you stand up next to me, even if you're telling your community that you're doing great things, which some of these police departments are, they just refuse to do it because it means standing up next to me. And I think that's a problem, because I think we are working together, actually, and I do think the community should know that and understand that we do work together, and we are going to disagree sometimes.
We have about a minute left. I just want to ask the last question here is just, after you leave, someone else could come in. Could they just reverse everything that you just did here? Do you anticipate that?
Well, many of the things that we've done are things that won't be changed. For instance, we have a conviction integrity unit, right? And we just had an exoneration of a man who had been in prison for 27 years for something he didn't do. And that was created when I came into the office. So my expectation is that the public, the community, people will say, hey, that's been doing good work. And I think that that's true of a lot of the things that we have done. When I'm out in community, I talk to people about what we're doing. They say, oh, that's great. How come we never hear about that? And so when they really hear about the public safety aspects that we're doing, they are generally on board. But it is almost always portrayed as me doing something, and because I'm doing it, it must be controversial.
Okay. We really appreciate you making the time to come in here. These conversations, I think, hopefully are helpful to people who see headlines here and there and different accounts, and to be able to hear, just like we did with Congressman Emmer yesterday, just like with you, and then they can make up kind of their own mind. So thanks for taking the time to come in.
I appreciate you inviting me in here to talk about these. I'm always willing to talk about what we're doing. I believe in transparency and believe in helping people understand what's actually happening. So thank you.